This podcast is for SEO professionals, and each week, with the help of our wonderful guests, we discuss the important stuff that actually affects our careers and progression, but sadly often doesn't get talked about. You know, the invaluable soft and interpersonal skills that are often taken for granted, such as the skills we need for listening, time management, communication, and more. We also talk about the big issues that affect us and our careers, such as burnout, imposter syndrome, self-belief, saying no, plus other big issues and obstacles. With this podcast, we want to share knowledge on topics that unlock our listeners' true potential and enhance not only their careers, but all parts of their lives. So, are you ready to prioritize your own personal growth and career development? Then let's crack on with this week's episode. Hello, and a very warm welcome to the SEO Mindset podcast, where your hosts are myself, Sarah McDowell, and the ever so fabulous Tasman Suleiman, with episodes going out every single Thursday. This week we have a bit of a treat in store, as I have the ever so delightful Jojo Furnival, marketing manager at Sitebulb, joining me on the podcast to discuss all things perimenopause. It is such a open, raw, honest conversation where Jojo shares her own experience with how it began, how she knew that she had perimenopause, her feelings, how it shows up in her job, and much, much more. It is such a great episode, and I can't wait for you guys to get listening. Who is Jojo? Jojo, as I said, is the marketing manager at Sitebulb, who has 15 years experience in content and SEO, with 10 years of those agency side. She works closely with the SEO community, collaborating on webinars, articles, and training content that helps to upskill SEOs. Before we crack on, just a reminder about how you can support the podcast. The podcast is set up on Buy Me a Coffee, which allows you to give us a one-off donation. Massive shout out and thanks to everyone who has already done so. And a reminder to follow the podcast wherever you listen to this podcast. And if you're feeling extra generous, why not give us a 5-star review? Right, are you ready to crack on with this episode? I know I am. Long time no speak, Jojo.
I know. Hi, how are you?
I think I've recovered, because the reason I say long time no speak is we were together at the fabulous Women in Tech Fest in London.
We were awesome one that Sitebulb was able to be a part of properly, including having Patrick Men there for the first time. So
it was a bit, because I've gone to all the previous ones. I think all of them. I think I've only missed one, and it did kind of keep taking me by surprise. Like, oh look, there's a man.
Yeah. Yeah. I reckon they must have. I mean, they were few and far between, and they must have felt a little bit conspicuous, but welcomed, very welcomed.
Very, very welcomed indeed. And I had such a lovely time. Whenever I go to a WTS Fest, I always come back feeling very like heart-filled, sort of. I feel like it's very wholesome. It's a lovely community. It's a lovely event. The speakers as well. Blimey.
Yeah.
Very, very good.
Just absolutely. I love every part of it. Like you said, I always come back. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's very tiring, but I always come back feeling so nourished by the community, I think. It's such a good vibe.
And you were there waving the Sitebulb flag?
Yes, I was. I went on my own last year just as an attendee, and that was just after I joined Sitebulb, and I was kind of going there on doing a recce for kind of thinking, yes, can Sitebulb be actually an official partner and supporter of this? And came away from there and was like, yep, come on, where do we sign? So yeah, this time we were, and we had a brand new stand, and Maruna, my colleague, she came as well, and Patrick too. So a full complement, well, not a full complement of Sitebulbers, but a handful.
And how did the swag go down?
Oh God, yeah, the swag. So we did Sitebulb branded Rubik's cubes, which was, I mean, I don't know, can you get more random than that as as swag? But I mean, they're pretty cool. We only did 50 of them, and they vanished by lunchtime. They were gone. Stickers. We had some very cool stickers, which I ended up putting all over my face. I think when the hysteria sort of set in, and you're like, I'm tired, but I'm really hyped. I'm just going to put stickers all over my
I
face.
mean, why would you not put stickers
Uh,
all over your face? I
you know,
mean, that just seems the most logical, sensible thing to do.
that's exactly, yeah, how I felt. And what else do we have? Oh yes, we had little like sticky notes, and I don't know what they're called. They're little coloured bits that you put in notebooks to.
I know what you're talking about. They're like
Okay,
colourful they're like tabs, sticky tabs.
tabs. That's the word. Yeah,
Well, there you go.
they seem to go down well.
Sounds like you smashed it. It sounds like, you should feel proud of your swag collection because that does sound pretty awesome. Now, Jojo,
Yes.
unfortunately, because we could spend this whole episode talking about the Women in Tech festival and the community, but that is not why I have invited you on the show. The reason I have invited you on the show is because we're going to talk about a very important topic, and that is perimenopause. And did you know? So I'm reading some research from NHS. So this is back in 2022, but they did a survey. And when they did the survey, they found that around 30 million people were currently living with perimenopause or menopause in the UK. Now that's a pretty big number and just goes to show how important this topic is today.
Yeah, so it is a massive number, and you would think that because of how big the number is, how prevalent the symptoms are for people and the issue is for people, that we'd be talking about it a lot more, but we're not.
Definitely, definitely. And that number is likely to be a lot higher because that's only going to be out of the people that know of the symptoms and sort of answered the survey. So, like any data, any research, whenever there's big numbers, there's probably a lot more. But yeah, so I'm very excited to have you on the show and to talk about this. And I think a sensible place to start is, how do you feel about being a bit transparent with our audience? And what would be really awesome is if you could sort of open up, and it's a safe space here, Joe. It's a supportive space here, but it'd be really awesome to know like how it began for you and how you knew that you had sort of perimenopause or that you were going through perimenopause.
I have had a history of anxiety, so for several years, let's say the last, I don't know, 8 years or so. But it was being successfully managed with medication. It had been for a long time, and then I found when I was 38 that it wasn't effective anymore. I was at the maximum. I had gone from the dose that had been perfectly fine for me for years up to the maximum dose that I was allowed to take. But I was finding that all of my anxiety symptoms on a day to day basis, like inability to concentrate, constantly feeling on edge, self doubt, inability to switch off or go to sleep, all of those kinds of, and just like constant, returned even after being at this high dose. And I was like, this isn't right, this isn't right. And then I started noticing that my hair was thinning, and then I was getting night sweats as well. So I went to the doctor, and I'm lucky because I have a really, really good doctor. They are not, and I know, having done a little bit of research, that this is not the case for most GPs throughout the country. Like, there is perimenopause is wildly underdiagnosed or misdiagnosed. But in my case, I went in, I said, I think my hair's thinning, and he said, yeah, I think you might be right. It could be hormonal. Let's do a hormone test. And yeah, the results of that came back as borderline estrogen indicative that it was hormone related. And at my age, it was looking as though it was early, a little bit early, but actually you can start perimenopause, from as early as 35 ish. And yeah, he put me on HRT.
Wow. I mean, thank you for being so open there and very transparent. And I am so glad to hear that you had a supportive GP because, like you said, that's not always the case. And there's so many times where a lot of, sadly, health conditions don't get diagnosed or get diagnosed as something else. And I'm so glad to hear that you had a positive experience. And I think sometimes we can focus on the doom and gloom of people's bad experiences, and it's important to talk about bad experiences. I'm not saying that, but I'm
Mm.
just so glad that you're here sharing a more positive experience with that diagnosis and talking to your GP.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, right, about perimenopause is that it is hard to diagnose because, I mean, he even said to me when I went for the hormone test was that this could very well come back with perfectly normal levels, and that doesn't mean that you haven't begun perimenopause, because your hormone levels are always fluctuating, even as a healthy reproductive female. So it's difficult to diagnose from that perspective. And generally speaking, the best way, well, the way that you diagnose menopause, which is at the end of perimenopause, is your periods have stopped. You've had no period for 12 months in a row. But in the interests of being perfectly transparent, I mean, why am I here if I'm not going to just tell you everything? So I don't have periods anyway, because I have the Mirena coil. So that is not a suitable diagnosis method in terms of where I am in my perimenopause journey or my menopause journey. But I think we can be fairly confident. So I mean, the average length of perimenopause is 4 years, and if I began, let's say I began my perimenopause journey age 38, so that could place me in the bracket of early menopause, which is between the ages of 40 and 45. But if it's before the age of 40, then that's premature perimenopause. So about 5% of women experience early menopause, which is probably my category, and then roughly 1% go through premature menopause.
It's very interesting to hear that there's sort of those different time periods and what's classed as early or things like that, because I wouldn't have even thought about that. So, yeah, it's interesting to know that information. And I suppose a question that I really want to ask you is, how are you feeling? How are you feeling after you were diagnosed?
So, yeah, I mean, this all came up last year. So hang on, is that right? Yes. How old am I? I'm 39. So I was 39 in November. So this came up when I was 38. So I've had a few months to get my head around it. And those few months were not great fun. I didn't feel, super awesome about that because, partly because it is early. Like, the average age for menopause in the US is 52. Arguably, I'm potentially about a decade early. Like, you can't, really, it's difficult to put an exact figure on it, but when you when I consider sort of the context that I have with my friendship group, they're I call them late bloomers when it comes to becoming parents. So and I'm slightly old. I'm on the older side of my friendship group, so they're all just having their babies now. I mean, and when I say all, I mean all of them. So I do feel isolated amongst my
Mm,
friends for the first time ever, really, through no fault of anyone's. And there is a little bit of a knock-on effect, like, I think I look younger than I am, but so people assume, if I ever sort of talk about it, or people assume that I've still got time, or they assume that children or whatever is going to be on my agenda, and that there's plenty of time yet. And it's a bit like, well, you don't know that actually. This, perimenopause, you can actually get pregnant during perimenopause, but I think I read that it's harder to bring a baby to full term. But I mean, you do need hormone replacement therapy and all of that kind of stuff. Anyway, it's just an enormous life change. Like, I don't feel like I can trust my emotions or my body, you know, anymore, or in the same way as I used to, because they're behaving differently. And I sort of feel at the same time very female, in the sense that this doesn't happen to men. Men don't have to deal with this, but also not very female at all, because my reproductive years are sort of coming to an end. So yeah, it's just weird.
I can imagine. And I think with any big life change, there is that time where you need to adapt to the new change. You need time to sort of process the new
New normal.
information, or sorry,
The new normal.
the new normal, exactly. And yeah, and it was quite hard hitting what you said about you feel very female because this is a very female situation to happen. But then with this, with the symptoms and what happens with perimenopause, I can imagine that, yeah, like it can be tricky. And I mean, we could easily go off on a bit of a tangent about pressures from society about having kids, having a
Yeah.
family, and maybe we do on a future, on another episode. But it must be so tricky. And yeah, and I just want to congratulate you on being really brave and coming on this podcast and talking to me and our listeners about it, because you're not alone. There's going to be other people that are going through this same thing. And actually, someone listening might be like, do you know what? I never thought about this. I have symptoms. I'm going to look into it. And I think sometimes, even though it's hard and you've got to adapt and there's a new normal, sometimes just knowing is better. So just to relate
Mm.
a little bit, I get to say fiance. And as soon as I say
Mhm.
fiance, I feel like going, ooh. But sadly, my fiance Tash got really poorly last May, last year. And she's still dealing with what happened and the symptoms from that. And there's lots of challenges, and I need to be very, very careful here because I'm speaking from her experience here. But one of the things that Tash struggles with is not knowing,
Mm.
so she's had all the tests, she's gone to loads of GPs and doctors, and no one can be like, this is what's going on.
Mm.
So I wonder whether sometimes it's got to be careful saying the word easier, but do you know what I mean? It's easier when you know what's going on, because
Totally.
then you can understand what's going on in your body and you have a better understanding.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, not exaggerating to say that I really thought I was going a bit mad for, quite some time. Everybody's perimenopause journey is different, right? And lots of people won't even have any symptoms, or they'll just have hot flashes, or they won't have any of these mood symptoms. I think I've done quite a lot of reading around it, and there's no concrete evidence, but it is suggested that if you've got a history of sort of mental health or mood wobbles, then you're more likely to have those sorts of symptoms when you hit perimenopause. And like, it's almost as though perimenopause exacerbates any kind of pre-existing condition or vulnerabilities that you've got. Like, you could have anything from joint and muscle aches to like really dry and itchy skin and loss of confidence and self-esteem, irritability, all of the, that's not even to mention the hot flashes and all of those kind of comedic, more well-known symptoms of menopause and perimenopause that, it's like, oh, what's a menopausal woman look like? Oh, she's having a hot flush. Like that, people know about that. But when it comes to the mood fluctuations and the concentration issues, the tiredness, the brain fog, like poor memory, they're less talked about and really challenging, particularly when it comes to like a work environment.
Well, you have very nicely led me on there, Jojo. And what I'm going to do is just take a short break. People can digest and just sit with what has been discussed at this moment. We're going to take a short break, but then when we come back, we'll talk about specifically how perimenopause has shown up at work for you. And then what would be really good is if we can get into sharing some practical advice and tips about how to manage perimenopause at work and what you find works well. Does that sound good?
Sounds great.
Okie dokie, let's take that short break. The live podcast is back. SEO Mindset and Search with Candour is teaming up again to record a podcast in front of a live audience the night before Brighton SEO. And the topic is all about personal brand. We'll be discussing what this is, why it's important, and sharing strategies and our own experiences. Time for the important details. It's happening Wednesday, the 9th of April, 2025. From 7 p.m. at Projects The Lanes. It's free to attend and there'll be free pizza, snacks and drinks. Please help us to spread the word. Tell your friends, your work colleagues, anyone and everyone, anyone who you think would really enjoy this event. It was a sellout last time, so grab your ticket today to secure your spot. To do that, simply head on over to the show notes and you'll find a link. We really look forward to seeing you on the night. Ever feel like your SEO strategy could use a boost? At Previsible, they don't just optimize websites, they build strategies to scale organic growth. Their team of seasoned experts partners with businesses at every stage, from startups to enterprises, crafting solutions that actually move the needle. Whether it's hands-on SEO consulting, recruiting the perfect SEO team, or empowering your in-house talent, Previsible has you covered. Visit previsible.io or follow the links in the show notes to see how they're pushing SEO forward, one strategy at a time. Ready to rank higher? Then let's get started. Introducing Clear Narrative Media, a purpose-led media marketing agency that transforms how founders, creatives, and organizations share their stories online. Dedicated to assisting you with all your marketing, content, and strategy needs. Their services include photography, consultancy, and social media management. Clear Narrative Media is here to transport your visions to life. They are on a mission to help you to create awareness, build visibility, and enhance your business and professional growth overall. For more information, head over to their website at cnmedia.com or follow the link in the show notes. We are back with part 2. Jojo, are you still with us?
I am. I'm here.
Good. And I'm very much enjoying this conversation.
Cool, cool, good. Yes. Well, it's me oversharing, which is what I do a lot.
It's not oversharing at all. Not oversharing. It's
Okay, cool.
important. We need to be having more conversations like this.
It is, it is.
My first question, part 2, is how did perimenopause, how does it show up at work? What are some of the challenges that you have?
Yeah, so it's a lot better now since I've been on estrogen, or the HRT, I should say. But initially, I found particularly challenging the sort of low inability to concentrate. Oh man, so hard. And I'm historically a really focused person. I, especially the fact that I work from home, so I work alone. I don't have any distractions of the office, nothing like that. But I, yes, was finding it really hard to just stay on task. I'd just wander off over here and forget what I was doing, and then I'd have to get up and walk around, go to the kitchen, unable to settle. But as I say, these are quite typically anxiety symptoms for me as well. So it was all of that stuff that came back. In a nutshell, it's sort of also my emotions really, really unstable emotions, which I hate saying it, because I feel like, even though certainly no one at my workplace would take the piss out of me for spontaneously combusting into tears, I feel like in general in society we're still not at a place where that is okay in a work environment. It's labeled as unprofessional, because well, it kind of is. But if you're not in control of it, if it's your body and your hormones that are just creating this spontaneous physiological reaction, what the hell are you going to do about it? So yeah, the mood and the sort of energy and concentration issues were particularly problematic for me. But then you add into that, if you've got nights where you're not sleeping well, you're not getting
Mm.
sleep, and then you've got night sweats and you wake up and you're absolutely drenched. And then I would have headaches the next day, and the tiredness, is ongoing. So all of that is particularly an issue, I think, when you're working in a strategic role, which I am. Like, you know, my brain, my head is why I'm here. And when my head is cloudy and forgetful and tired and emotional, it's a constant uphill struggle just doing what you're paid to do.
I can imagine. And have you found strategies or things that you can do to help manage these situations?
Yeah, I mean, I can't overstate the value of HRT. And I think for anybody who is unsure still, so there was a study. I don't know if you've come across the Davina McCall documentary that she made on the menopause a few years ago. That is a real eye opener, and through that I learned, like, so HRT got a really bad rap for a long time because of one study that was misleading and inaccurate. And for ages the headline was, HRT causes cancer, when in actual fact, that's definitely not the case at all. But even still, there is a reluctance, I think, in lots of women to take HRT because of that, but also partly because, I don't know, you think it's an old woman thing to do. Or at least I feel like an old woman now because I'm taking it. But so I think that's one of the things that we need to address in society. But we'll come to that later. I would not be able to cope with doing my job in a normal way without HRT. But also, for me, flexibility is really important. And in my work, like if I'm feeling dreadful in the morning because I've slept really, really badly, or, whatever it is, knowing that I've got that flexibility to kind of work around my symptoms is really valuable. And I also know that I've got the support of the Sitebulb leadership team and the whole team in general. I'm sure that not every employee can say that about their workplace.
Mm.
But the other
Which
thing
is
I
sad.
think, it is really sad. It's really, really sad. And that's why, I'm having another reason why I'm having this conversation and why we need to talk about it within the SEO community, because there are employers in the SEO community and they need to pay attention and think about their employees. But also being part of, like, I've found since going on this journey that I really want to be a part of female driven groups and communities a lot more. Like I was one of those girls that growing up I was always mates with boys, and of course I still am, but they don't get it, you
Of
know.
course not. They can do their best, but I think lived experience, if you're not in that body and you don't understand,
Mm,
you need to find your people.
yeah. That said, I mean, I had a really good chat with. So most people know Patrick at Sitebulb, but Gareth is the other co-founder, and oh goodness, I hope he doesn't mind me saying this, but he was talking to me about his wife's experience. So I think perhaps older men, I mean, I'm generalizing here, but I think it is because, I am coming into this space a little early. I'm kind of graduating towards slightly older people because they're more likely to have direct or indirect experience of it.
Yes, definitely. And I think it's so important to have support around you. And I think it's a good sort of reminder that workplaces can always do better and do their thing. Like, you don't know what's going on for employees just
Mm,
because they could be having a bad day, or like not just about perimenopause, but anything.
mm,
Like, things happen, and we're not robots, we're humans. We're not we can't just output work at 100% all the time.
yes,
And I think I have put a lot of pressure on myself in the past, because you think and you expect yourself to be 100% all the time at
yes,
at your work, and that's just impossible, because you can't operate at 100%, because you're not going to be at 100%. But even on a day where you can't do 100%, and let's say it's like 30%, that's still 100% for that day. So
yeah,
I think we need more of these conversations about perimenopause, about menopause, about other situations, other things that are going to affect people in the workplace, because that's how people get support. And
other life experiences, right? It's all part of the human experience. It's all part of being human, and also, from our perspective as like an SEO community, we can speak, here and now. We can speak to how things are in the UK, and how, you quoted an NHS stat at the start there, and like would probably know a little bit about how employers are looking after their employees in this country. But SEO is global, and like there are countries everywhere, and they're going to be handling this or not handling this in a totally different way. Like, I used to live in Australia, and I'm not going to say anything other than they are not in they're not the UK. They're not the UK. And the UK isn't Australia. All countries deal with things differently and have different governmental and medical setups. So that's why, like, we need to make sure that, if we feel like things are fine over here, well, that's great, but they're not necessarily fine everywhere.
Exactly. And that's such a good point, isn't it? Is having that awareness of other places. And probably what happens most of the time is I always feel that ignorance happens when there is uneducation around a certain area, or when, if you don't know, you don't know. So I think a lot of the times people or companies aren't, or people in leadership roles aren't going to be supportive of something that they don't know enough about. So
Yeah,
it's important to have conversations with people in your team and understand what they're going through, and
yeah,
understand, okay, talk to me about this, talk to me about what your challenges are, because then you can have an honest conversation together and find, and a business, a leader, a manager can find ways to best support that person.
I mean, I know I've mentioned it a couple of times already, but that's why it's one of the reasons why I sort of can't fault like Sitebulb for their support. Like we're talking about a company, very, very small company that was founded by two middle-aged white men, and they won't mind me saying that. I say it to their face. So, but they are, they've supported the women in tech SEO community from the beginning.
Yeah.
They appreciate that half of their workforce, are female, and they've now like they're putting in place steps to try and be supportive as an employer, which also it's taken for granted, like, but usually these are steps that are put in place by much bigger organizations, I think, is the point that I'm trying to make. And we're a small team of seven, I think, or six, can't remember. And we've now got workplace health sort of scheme, so that we can get physio and mental health sessions. We can have that as part of our, we can sort of be supported in that way. And something that you found, actually, there's the workplace menopause workplace pledge.
Yes, there
And
is.
yeah, so and employers can sign that, and as soon as I sent it over to Patrick, he signed it straight away. So I think they're going in the right direction, and lots of other businesses should sort of take them as their lead.
Definitely, definitely. And I'm just mindful of time, Jojo, because we are rapidly, rapidly running out of time. But this has been such an insightful and a great conversation. And I think there's going to be lots of people from our listeners that are going to find this so useful. So thank you so much. What is the main takeaway for listeners?
I think the key takeaway is that this is so, 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 so common. If you're female, you will at some point will experience menopause. You may not have perimenopause symptoms, but it's likely that you do. And if you do, don't be ashamed and go and get HRT.
I mean, a quick point on that HRT is that the media is an awful place sometimes, isn't it? And so many times they will run a headline like what you've said about HRT causing cancer. But then if you see the source, you'll see that the research would have been on a really small sample or
Mm,
misleading. But we have to remember that in the media, sadly, there's a lot of scaremongering, and you have to take things with the pinch of salt. Always do your research, always talk to health professionals, always talk to your GPs, because there's going to be risks with anything. There's risks with, I don't know why my brain's doing this, but if you read the risks involved with taking paracetamol, it's ridiculous. Have you ever done that?
Oh, don't read. Yeah, well,
It's
do. I mean, I can't advise not people to not read the leaflets that are in medication, but also don't read them unless you want to think you're about to die.
But yeah, just take things with a pinch of salt, do your research and do things that are right for you. And also, it's so important to have these conversations. Like 50% of the workplace are going to have perimenopause, or sort of they're going to be having these situations or be impacted by situations like the perimenopause. So we need to talk about it, and it's okay to say the word period. I love the fact that you've said period, because that's another thing. People are scared of that word again. So yeah, I think this is so important, and yeah, so thank you so much, Jojo.
No worries.
Before I allow you to leave me, that was a really weird way of saying that, but I'm just gonna
You are now
carry
dismissed.
yeah. You can now leave the studio. No, there are questions that we ask all of our guests. So, are you ready for those questions?
Hit me with it.
Okay. So you've already given a key takeaway. So that was one of them. We're already a step ahead of ourselves. The next one is, what's your best career advice?
It's probably been said before, but I think that you need to be authentically yourself, because you're going to be working for a long time. And if you're not being yourself, that's going to be incredibly tiring for you. And that, that way leads to burnout, etc., etc. You be you. We live in a world where, employers are becoming more aware that it's people that they're employing, not robots, as you said. So be you.
I love that. I love that. And I think we have a previous episode about authenticity. So, you've helped us out there to internally link to a previous episode. This is a hard question, so I am sorry, but I'm going to do it anyway. We have a wonderful community, a wonderful SEO community, and I would like you to pick one person from that community that you recommend people follow because they're just doing awesome things.
I mean, way harsh, and shame on you for forcing me to pick. But also, I think Emina Demiri Watson she is doing some really awesome stuff at the moment. She's a very, very cool lady. She says she's too curious to specialize, and that's why I think she's an awesome person to follow, because when she goes down a rabbit hole, when she gets interested in something, she goes all the way down the rabbit hole. She does all of this research. She gives you, all the stuff that she's learned, and then she'll probably move on to something else. So you won't need, so you don't get bored. In fact, I just saw her talk at WTS Fest about, God, how to use AI responsibly. And it was very, 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 very interesting. I mean, I only understood about half of it, but it was very cool.
Amazing. I'll make sure that we have links to where to follow her in the show notes, so we can do that. And yeah, that is it. That is that's enough of my grilling. Not that I really did grill you, but I would just like to say once again, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing your experience with perimenopause. Thank you so much. Very useful episode for our listeners. Before I do sign off, just an ask that if you are enjoying what me and Tasmin are doing, you enjoy the podcast and listen to the episodes, there are loads of ways that you can support us. We are set up on Buy Me a Coffee, which allows you to give us a virtual coffee. You can give us a one-off donation, which would be very cool. And a big thank you to everyone who has already done that. And also, if you could follow and maybe even give us a review the next time you listen to an episode, because we're SEOs, we know how algorithms work. I don't think I said algorithm right there. That was just a jumble of words, but I've done it anyway. If you wouldn't mind doing that, that would help us get this podcast under more people's noses or in their ears. I've fluffed this, haven't I? Under their noses, in their you listened. Yeah. Anyway, on that note, on that very smooth wrap up, take care of yourselves, and until next time.
Bye.
Today's episode is brought to you by Furnival, your partner in scalable SEO growth. From consulting to recruiting and AI search optimization, Furnival's solutions are built for brands looking to lead in search. Discover what a strategy-first approach can do for your visibility. Learn more at previsible.io or follow the links in the show notes and start seeing results that last. Looking to create awareness, build visibility, and enhance growth for your business, organization, or yourself? Introducing Clear Narrative Media, a purpose-led media and marketing agency that transforms how founders, creatives, and organizations share their stories online. Dedicated to assisting you with all your marketing, content, and strategy needs. You can find them on all social media platforms and online at cnmedia.com or follow the link in the show notes. Don't forget about that live podcast happening the night before Brighton SEO, which is all about personal brand. Yep, the SEO Mindset and Search with Candour podcasts are teaming up again. It's happening Wednesday, the 9th of April, 2025 from 7 p.m. at Projects The Lanes. It's free to attend and there'll be free pizza, snacks and drinks. Please help us to spread the word. Tell your friends, work colleagues, anyone and everyone. Help us shout it from the rooftops. It was a sellout last time, so to avoid that horrible FOMO feeling, grab your ticket today to secure your spot. Head on over to the show notes for the link and we look forward to seeing you on the night.